I never imagined I'd find metal spikes buried in Grandma Eleanor's driveway. But the moment the Willow Ridge HOA started targeting her charming blue cottage, I realized this wasn't just about some petty violation. It was personal. And when I uncovered my grandmother's secret life as a senior prosecutor specializing in real estate fraud, everything clicked. This wasn't harassment, it was revenge. What would these corrupt officials do when they realized their target was the one investigating them? It was early afternoon when I pulled into Grandma Eleanor Walker's driveway, the summer sun beating down, the air a warm 85 degrees. My suitcase sat in the back seat along with a box of her favorite glazed donuts from Pine Haven Bakery, just like every childhood summer visit. The little blue cottage, trimmed in white and nestled between towering pine trees, looked exactly the same, except for one thing. A bright orange paper flapped on the front door like a warning flag. My stomach dropped. I climbed out, grabbing the paper with shaky hands. Violation notice, unapproved exterior paint color. Action required within 72 hours. What? That sky blue color had graced Grandma's cottage for decades. I stared at the familiar wooden siding, baffled. "Welcome to Willow Ridge," a voice chimed, dripping with artificial sweetness. I turned to see a woman standing at the property line, arms crossed over her designer blouse, short blonde hair perfectly highlighted. "I'm Karen Whitmore, chair of the Community Standards Committee." Of course, I thought, the infamous HOA Karen. I forced a polite smile. "Hi, I'm Jamie Walker, Eleanor's grandchild. I'm house-sitting while she recovers from surgery." Karen's lips curled into a fake smile that didn't reach her eyes. Such a shame about Eleanor. "We've been neighbors, 5 years now? The rules clearly state exterior paint colors must be approved. That blue was grandfathered in, but once a repaint is needed, it must follow the approved earth tone palette." I glanced at the cottage. "It doesn't look repainted or faded to me." Karen shrugged. "Our inspector noted significant fading on the west wall. The violation stands. You have 72 hours, or the fines start at $100 a day." As Karen walked away, I caught sight of her husband, Robert Thompson, CEO of Pinnacle Development Group, watching us from their oversized gray and white house next door. He ducked inside when our eyes met. Inside the cottage, everything was just as I remembered. Handmade quilts, shelves of mystery novels, the comforting scent of cinnamon. I called Grandma at the rehab center. "Jamie, sweetheart, you made it." I told her about the notice. She sighed. "That's the third this month. First it was the roses, then the mailbox, now this. But you've owned this place 4 decades. How can they enforce these rules now?" "Because Pinnacle Development took over the HOA board," Grandma explained. "Richard Vaughn, lawyer for Pinnacle, is the new president. They're after my lot, Creek View, corner property, perfect for their next luxury model home." A chill ran down my spine despite the summer heat. "I'll handle this, Grandma. Just focus on getting better." I forced myself to stay calm, clutching the bent mailbox post tighter. "Thanks, but I'll just repair this one. It's an original feature of the property," I said, steadying my voice. Karen Whitmore's smile stiffened, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Well, damaged mailboxes are against regulations," she replied sweetly, though the threat behind her words was clear. "If it's not replaced with an approved model, the committee will have to issue another violation." That was it. I'd had enough. "I'll be sure to bring all these violations to the next HOA meeting." "When is that, by the way?" For the first time, something flickered in Karen's eyes. Worry. She hesitated. "Not for 3 weeks, but Richard can process emergency matters anytime. In fact, I'm meeting him this afternoon. I'd be happy to mention your situation." "No need," I replied firmly. "I'll handle it myself." Turning my back, I headed inside, but I couldn't ignore the sound of Karen's voice floating over her front lawn, low and hurried as she spoke into her phone. "She's not leaving. No, I don't think she knows anything. We might need to accelerate the timeline." My stomach dropped. What timeline? What were they planning? I paced the small living room, trying to piece together why the HOA was suddenly targeting Grandma Eleanor so aggressively. And the biggest question of all, who put those tire spikes in the driveway? I couldn't shake the growing suspicion that something far bigger was unfolding here. I needed answers. and I needed to meet this Richard Vaughn face to face. The Willow Ridge HOA website listed office hours from 1 to 4 p.m. at the Pine Haven Community Center. I checked my watch. It was just past 1. Without wasting another second, I grabbed my folder stuffed with the violation notices, the photos of the tire spikes, and the HOA regulations I'd studied half the night. The community center gleamed under the bright sun, its freshly painted walls and manicured landscaping a stark contrast to the harassment directed at Grandma's humble blue cottage. I pushed through the glass doors, my heart pounding. A receptionist with a plastic smile pointed me down the hallway. As I neared the office, I froze. Through the slightly open door, I heard Karen's voice, sharp, agitated. "We need to move quickly on the Walker property. My sources say she's been poking around the county records office." "Patience, Karen," a smooth male voice replied. "The assessment increase goes into effect next week. Between that and the violations, she'll be financially underwater by month's end." Before Karen could respond, I pushed the door open. Two faces snapped toward me, both masked quickly with professional smiles. Karen stood, brushing invisible lint from her designer blouse. "Jamie Walker, what a coincidence," she chirped. "We were just discussing your grandmother's situation with our HOA president, Richard Vaughn." Richard stood, extending a hand. Mid-50s, tanned, dressed in an expensive golf shirt. "Pleasure to meet you, Jamie. We're all concerned about your grandmother's property falling into disrepair while she's away." I shook his hand but didn't smile. My eyes flicked to a photo on his desk. Richard shaking hands with Robert Thompson in front of a Pinnacle Development Group banner. "Funny you should mention disrepair," I said coolly, pulling the tire spikes from my bag and placing them on his polished desk. "I found these buried in my grandmother's driveway yesterday." Richard's smile didn't fade, but his eyes hardened. "That's concerning, but vandalism is a police matter, not HOA business." "I've already filed a report," I lied smoothly. "They're checking security footage. Thought you should know. This happened right after your violation notice appeared." Karen paled. "Are you implying something?" I laid out the violation notices. "I'm implying these violations cite rules that don't exist. Section 12.4 protects historic properties like my grandmother's cottage." Richard's facade slipped for a moment. "The board voted to remove those exemptions." "That's illegal without homeowner notification," I shot back. "I'll need that in writing," he growled. "Already done," I smiled, showing my certified receipt. "Oh, and one more thing. Why did Pinnacle submit building plans for my grandmother's lot 3 months ago?" The silence was deafening. Finally, Richard sneered. "Speculative plans." "Combined with harassment," I challenged. Karen stood. "That's outrageous." "Then you won't mind if I request the violation records for the last 6 months," I added. Richard's jaw clenched. "Submit your request. We'll respond in 30 days. "I already did," I smiled. Before I could leave, Richard added, "Oh, by the way, there's a $300 special assessment coming. Corner properties only. Starts next week." The threat hung heavy. Back off or it gets worse. I kept my expression neutral despite the anger boiling inside me. "I'll make sure she gets the notice," I said flatly. "And the housing authority will get a copy too." Outside in the parking lot, I leaned against my car, hands trembling from the confrontation. This wasn't petty HOA harassment anymore. It was organized, systematic pressure designed to force people out of their homes. As I glanced back at the community center, I spotted Karen Whitmore watching me through the window, phone pressed to her ear. I needed allies and information. According to Grandma, she'd lived in Pine Haven for over 30 years. She had to have friends who'd noticed what was happening, maybe even experienced similar pressure. As I pulled out of the lot, I caught a glimpse of a silver sedan pulling out after me, keeping a steady distance. I made several random turns through the neighborhood. The car stayed with me. Only when I headed toward the Pine Haven police station did it finally peel away. My phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Is this Eleanor Walker's grandchild?" a nervous woman's voice asked. "Yes. This is Jamie. Who's calling?" "My name is Sophia Ramirez. I live across the street from your grandmother." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Don't go back to the cottage right now. They're watching it. Meet me at the Riverside Cafe in 20 minutes. I have information about what's happening to Eleanor and the others." Others? I repeated, my concern deepening. Sophia's answer was quiet but firm. Your grandmother's not the first they've targeted, but she might be the one who finally stops them. If you help her. 20 minutes. Come alone. The line went dead. I sat frozen in my idling car, heart pounding. Was this a trap? Or my first real lead? Either way, I had to know more. I turned toward downtown, heading for the Riverside Cafe. One question swirling in my mind. What did Sophia mean? What made Grandma so important in all this? Later that evening, glass crunched under my shoes as I swept up the shattered flower pot thrown through Grandma's window. Taped to the rock was a note, written in jagged letters. Sell now or worse will come. My hands shook with fury. This wasn't just neighborly spite anymore. This was criminal. You okay over there? Called Mr. Durham Washington from across the street. He pointed to his doorbell camera. Got it on video if you need it. I nodded gratefully, hurrying back inside. I needed Grandma's property papers, proof to fight the HOA's false claims. Her study was as neat as I remembered. Every box labeled by year. But one thing stood out, a small metal filing cabinet in the corner, secured with a heavy padlock I'd never noticed before. Rain started pouring outside as I frantically searched for a key. Lightning flashed, illuminating the tiny golden gavel charm on Grandma's desk, the one she always wore on a chain. On a hunch, I tried it in the lock. It clicked open. Inside, my breath caught. Not just property deeds, but a folder labeled Pinnacle Development Group. Evidence file. I flipped through it, photos of Richard Vaughn shaking hands with powerful-looking men, bank statements, secret recordings, maps of neighborhoods, all marked with red circles. What are you doing with my case files? Grandma's voice came through my phone. I must have hit speed dial by accident. Grandma, why do you have investigation files on Pinnacle? I whispered, stunned. A pause, then her voice hardened in a way I'd never heard. Jamie, I need you to listen carefully. That file contains evidence I've spent 2 years gathering. I'm not just a retired school teacher. I'm Senior Prosecutor Eleanor Walker, White Collar Crime Division. This hip surgery is my cover. My knees gave out as I sank into her chair. Pinnacle's been targeting seniors in 3 counties. They use the HOA to harass people, then buy the homes cheap. Richard runs the legal side. Karen scouts the targets. My head spun. That's why they want this cottage. A thunderous crash cut her off. I ran to the window. Karen's SUV was speeding away. Downstairs, the living room window was shattered. Rain poured in. One of the evidence folders was gone. They took your file. I shouted into the phone. Check the blue cookbook on the 3rd shelf, Grandma ordered. There's a backup. Sure enough, I found a hollowed-out cookbook with a USB drive. Grandma's calm voice came through. They'll think you know everything now. Get out. Take the files to Sophia Ramirez. She's been helping me. Outside, Richard Vaughn's voice boomed as his fist pounded the door. Jamie, open up. We need to discuss violations. My blood ran cold. Back door, now, Grandma ordered. Go. I heard Richard's voice echo through the house. Find those documents. Heavy footsteps pounded up the stairs as I slipped toward the back door. My hand was just closing around the knob when Karen's cold voice stopped me in my tracks. Going somewhere? She asked, blocking my exit. A fake smile plastered on her face that didn't reach her eyes. My grandmother, she asked me to water her plants while she's away, I lied, forcing my voice steady, the backpack with the files clutched tightly against my chest. Karen's eyes narrowed as she stood her ground. Then you won't mind if we check what's in that bag, she smirked, reaching for me. Richard found something downstairs. My heart pounded against my ribs. I needed a distraction, fast. Pretending to stumble, I knocked over a vase. The crash of shattering glass startled Karen enough that she instinctively jumped back. Seizing the moment, I bolted past her, shoved open the screen door, and sprinted into the rain-soaked yard. Stop her, Karen screamed, but I was already running, heart racing, mud splashing up my jeans. The rain pelted down in heavy sheets as I tore between houses, not daring to look back. I had no idea where 156 Maple was, but all that mattered was getting away. Richard's angry shouts faded behind me as I ducked behind a neighbor's garden shed to catch my breath. Pulling out my phone with trembling hands, I frantically searched for Sofia Ramirez's address. Maple Street was 2 blocks away. Just as I was about to make a run for it, a text buzzed from an unknown number. "Behind you, don't scream, I'm a friend." I whirled around, heart in my throat. An elderly woman with steel gray hair stood under an umbrella. "Sofia Ramirez," she whispered. "Eleanor texted me. Come, quickly." Without another word, Sofia led me through winding backyard shortcuts until we reached a small yellow house tucked behind a beautiful garden. Once inside, she locked 3 heavy deadbolts behind us. "Welcome to Resistance headquarters," she said grimly, gesturing toward a dining table covered in maps, documents, and laptops. 3 other seniors sat waiting. A tall man with snow-white hair stood. "Judge Marcus Johnson, retired." He introduced himself. "Eleanor told us you have the files?" I nodded, pulling the USB and documents from my soaked backpack. "Perfect," said a woman with reading glasses and a notepad. "Debbie Patel, editor of the Pine Haven Gazette. I've been tracking these shady property transfers for months." The last person, a man hunched over a laptop, nodded. "Tyler Washington, those cameras on my porch? Not just for show." Sofia handed me a cup of hot chocolate as they laid out the full scope of Pinnacle Development's scheme. They'd infiltrated HOA boards and senior communities, pushing impossible regulations and fines until elderly homeowners gave up and sold, cheap. "Your grandmother moved here on purpose," Debbie explained, after the 3rd county reported the same pattern. She volunteered to go undercover. Tyler spun his laptop toward me. "Footage. Richard and Karen placing those caltrops in Eleanor's driveway. Later, breaking her window." Marcus nodded. "We've got enough to expose them, but we need Eleanor's case files to make it stick." I held up the USB. "It's all here, but they know I have it. They'll come after me." Sofia smiled. "That's exactly what we want." They revealed their plan. Each had gathered pieces of evidence. Marcus had the legal connections, Debbie the press, Tyler the surveillance. Sofia knew every neighbor affected, but one thing was missing. "We need you," Debbie said, unrolling a map of Pine Haven. Red X's marked homes already forced to sell. Blue circles showed current targets. In the center, Eleanor's corner lot. "This is what they're after." Marcus pointed to plans for a luxury lakeside resort. "They need just 4 more properties, including your grandmother's." Sofia spoke next. "Tomorrow night, there's an emergency HOA meeting. They're voting on foreclosures." Tyler grinned. "And lucky for us, Richard's terrible at cybersecurity. His password, his dog's name and birth year." My jaw dropped. "You have their emails?" "Oh, we have everything," Tyler smirked. "They plan to vote, then push through forced sales." A plan formed. We'd show up with the neighbors and expose them all. But we needed Grandma. "I'll call her," I offered, grabbing my phone. "No," Sofia warned. "Use the landline. They're probably tracking you." As I dialed, Debbie slid me a draft newspaper headline. "State Prosecutor uncovers massive HOA fraud ring in Pine Haven." "You can't publish that yet," I warned. Debbie winked. "After the meeting." Grandma answered on the 3rd ring. I laid out our plan. She was quiet. "It's too soon unless you have Robert Thompson." "We do," Tyler called out, pulling up security footage. Robert handing Richard a folder behind the community center. "Send that to my secure email," Grandma said. "And tell Sofia, activate protocol checkmate." Sofia's eyes lit up. "She's ready." Lights flickered, then died. Through the window, I saw Karen's SUV crawling past. "They're looking for you," Marcus whispered. "Tyler, show our young friend the basement," Sofia added. Tyler guided me to a small but secure room. "Welcome to our safe house," he smiled. "You're part of this now." Tyler handed me a legal pad. "Write down everything you've seen. Times, dates, exact words. We'll need your testimony to be airtight." I nodded and began scribbling, but froze when a noise echoed from upstairs. Moments later, Sofia hurried down, pale. "They just updated the HOA newsletter. The meeting's been moved up to tomorrow morning. They're trying to push this through before Eleanor can get here." Marcus cursed under his breath. "They're getting desperate." "Can we delay them?" I asked. Debbie grinned mischievously. "Leave that to me. I've got press credentials and a lot of very detailed questions they'll need to answer on the record before any vote happens." While the others went upstairs to adjust the point, I flipped through the files. A photo fell out, stopping me cold. Karen and Richard stood outside a state prison, smiling next to a sign. Thompson visits former HOA president James Willis, convicted in similar scheme, 2022. My stomach turned. This wasn't their first time. Someone had already gone to prison for this. Headlights swept across the window. I peeked outside to see Richard knocking on Sophia's front door, flanked by two men, one in a Pine Haven Village security uniform. "Ms. Ramirez," Richard's oily voice carried through the window. "We're conducting a wellness check on all elderly residents. Mind if we come in? It's 11 p.m. Sophia's face twisted in disbelief. "I don't think so." I shrank against the basement wall, pulse racing. This wasn't just about property anymore. They knew. We were all in danger now. Sophia slammed the door shut. Moments later, Tyler appeared at the stairs. "Pack up," he whispered. "They're watching the house. We move. Tonight." I scrambled to gather the files as Sophia handed me a burner phone. It buzzed in my hand. "Grandma, don't go to the meeting. It's a trap. They know who I am." My hands trembled as I peered through the kitchen window. Karen and Richard stuffed foreclosure notices into mailboxes, perfect smiles plastered on their faces. Karen glanced our way. I ducked. "They're delivering the kill shot," Sophia whispered. "Special meeting tomorrow to foreclose on problem properties." The phone buzzed again. Grandma's voice was steady, stronger than I'd heard in weeks. "I'm coming home now. We're setting a trap." "But your recovery," I gasped. "Some things matter more than my hip," she cut me off. "My team's ready. We need them to confess in front of witnesses." Marcus leaned forward. "Eleanor's been building this case for months. Pinnacle's done this to 5 communities already. It ends here." "We play dumb," Debbie advised, her reporter's notebook filling with names. "Let them think they're winning." Hours later, I helped Grandma Eleanor unpack, secretly, at Judge Marcus's house. She looked frailer, but her eyes burned with resolve. Spreading files across the dining table, she shook her head. Their mistake was picking me. She pointed to a photo of Richard meeting Robert Thompson behind the law office. They had no idea I was already investigating Pinnacle when I moved here. Tyler burst in with a small device. "Got it. Audio recorder disguised as a hearing aid." Grandma smiled. "Perfect. We need them on record. The HOA meeting is our chance." That night, I barely slept. A car idled outside the window, watching. Morning dragged. I paced until finally Marcus arrived at 6:30 p.m., sharp to drive us to the community center. "Remember," he warned, "act surprised. We need them to confess." Grandma adjusted her hearing aid, smoothing her blouse. For a moment, I glimpsed the prosecutor she truly was. Sharp, focused, unstoppable. The community center buzzed with nervous energy. Karen's smile faltered when she saw Eleanor leaning on my arm. Richard nearly dropped his gavel. "Eleanor, what a surprise," Karen stammered. "We weren't expecting you until next month." "I recovered faster than expected." Grandma smiled sweetly. "Couldn't miss a meeting about my own property." Richard forced composure. "Let's begin." From across the room, I saw Sophia, Debbie, and 5 other neighbors. Older, anxious. This was bigger than Grandma's cottage now. Richard slammed the gavel. First item, foreclosure vote on 7 properties with outstanding violations and unpaid special assessments. My heart pounded as the spreadsheet projected onto the screen. Grandma's cottage was listed first, followed by Sophia's and 5 others. "These properties have failed to meet our standards," Richard declared. "The board recommends foreclosure." Karen stood, clipboard tight. "Pinnacle Development has generously offered to buy these distressed properties at 60% of market value. It's a mercy, really." A murmur rippled through the room. I glanced at Grandma. She gave a slight nod. I shot to my feet. "That's robbery! My grandmother's property has no legitimate violations." Richard's face darkened. "Young lady, that cottage violates 6 bylaws and she's 3 months behind on special assessments." "Special assessments you invented last month," I shot back. Karen's face paled. Karen Whitmore stepped forward, her voice rising above the murmur of the room. "The board's decision is final. These properties damage our community's value. Robert has investors lined up, waiting to build modern homes that will increase everyone's property values." "So that's what this is really about," Grandma Eleanor Walker's voice rang out. cutting through the tension like a blade. Forcing out long-term residents. Also, your husband's development company can cash in. The room fell silent. You could hear the creak of the floorboards as Richard Vaughn, face red with anger, slammed his gavel. That's enough. Security, remove Miss Walker and her granddaughter from this meeting immediately. Two security guards took a step forward, but before they could reach us, the back door of the community center burst open. 4 men in dark suits strode in, badges gleaming under the overhead lights. Actually, Grandma said, standing tall, no longer leaning on me or her cane, this meeting will continue. My colleagues from the Attorney General's office are very interested in hearing about these special assessments and your connections to Pinnacle Development. Karen's face drained of all color, her mouth falling open in silent horror. Richard lunged for his laptop, but Tyler Washington was faster. He snatched it up and plugged it into the projector. I think everyone here deserves to see this, Tyler announced, his voice calm but firm. The screen flickered to life. The first image showed Richard and Karen sneaking into Grandma's driveway under cover of night, placing metal tire spikes, caltraps, right where car tires would hit. Gasps rippled through the room. The video continued, showing Richard meeting Robert Thompson behind the community center, accepting a thick envelope. This meeting is over, Richard roared, bolting for the side exit. 2 state officers moved swiftly, blocking his path. Richard Vaughn, Karen Whitmore, one officer said coldly, we have a few questions about your real estate practices across 3 counties. Grandma didn't flinch. She turned to the stunned crowd, her voice steady. I also have a warrant to search the HOA's financial records and all communications with Pinnacle Development. The neighbors sat in shocked silence as the officers secured the room. Grandma drew in a deep breath and faced the people she had quietly protected for months. I owe you all an apology. I'm not just Eleanor Walker, the retiree next door. I'm Senior Prosecutor Eleanor Walker, White Collar Crime Division. Karen collapsed into a chair, her face pale, mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Richard's face twisted in rage. You'll never prove anything, he spat. Grandma smiled calmly, removing her hearing aid and holding it high. I believe I just did. The hearing aid blinked once, recording complete. Gasps echoed around the room as the weight of it all sank in. State police officers filed in behind my grandmother. This isn't what it looks like, Richard stammered, backing away as the projector screen replayed him placing spikes in the driveway. Save it for court, the lead officer growled, reading Richard his rights as another officer moved to handcuff Karen. Her eyes were wide with fear, her designer blouse no longer offering the protection she thought it did. I couldn't stop the grin from spreading across my face. Neighbors whispered furiously, eyes darting between Richard, Karen, and Grandma. The pieces were finally falling into place. Mrs. Sophia Ramirez squeezed my hand, her eyes brimming with tears. Your grandmother. She was building this case for all of us. Outside, the sound of tires on gravel signaled the arrival of news vans. Grandma's team had tipped off the press. Debbie Patel, notebook in hand, winked at me as she snapped photos, already crafting the headline for tomorrow's edition. 3 weeks later, Grandma's blue cottage looked better than ever. The roses bloomed freely now, climbing along the fence line with no fear of violation notices. The air smelled sweet again. Neighbors stopped by daily, bringing casseroles and thank you cards. Word spread fast about how close Pine Haven had come to being destroyed by Pinnacle Development. The DA was offering Richard and Karen a plea deal if they testified against Robert Thompson. Grandma explained it all to me as we sat on her porch swing, lemonade glasses sweating in the late afternoon heat. They'll still serve time, she said matter-of-factly. Property damage, fraud, that's not going away. Judge Marcus Johnson stopped by later that day, a folder in his hand. The new HOA bylaws, he said proudly, handing them to Grandma. No more loopholes, no more developer exploitation. The residents voted unanimously. What surprised me most wasn't the legal victory, but how quickly the community healed. Sophia Ramirez was elected the new HOA president. Tyler Washington personally installed free security systems for every elderly homeowner in Pine Haven. The neighborhood had come together in a way I'd never imagined. Even Karen's teenage son came by, head hung low. I'm sorry for what my family did. If you need help, I can mow your lawn this summer, he offered. Grandma smiled, her eyes softening just a little. That would be nice, son. Across the street, a for sale sign stood in front of the Whitmore house, empty now. Children laughed and played nearby, their voices carrying on the breeze. Life in Pine Haven was returning to normal. Better than normal. You know, Grandma mused, watching the kids, I was planning to retire next month, but I think I'll stay on a bit longer. There are HOAs like this all across the state that need cleaning up. I grinned. Need a research assistant? I'm seriously considering changing my major to law. She laughed, squeezing my hand. I think we make a good team. For the first time in weeks, I felt it too. Hope. Pine Haven had fought back and won. The story of Grandma Eleanor Walker's battle against a corrupt HOA in Pine Haven is a powerful reminder that standing up for what's right isn't just about protecting your own home. It's about protecting your entire community. In a world where greed and power often hide behind polished smiles and well-dressed committees, Eleanor showed us that courage, knowledge, and persistence can expose even the most well-orchestrated schemes. The biggest lesson here is that laws and regulations are meant to protect homeowners, not be weaponized against them. Too often, HOAs or developers exploit legal loopholes, counting on residents, especially seniors, to be too intimidated, isolated, or exhausted to fight back. But this story reminds us that no one is truly powerless, especially when people come together. Eleanor didn't win because she was a prosecutor. She won because she built a network of allies who cared about justice. Sophia, the quiet neighbor with a watchful eye. Tyler, the tech-savvy retiree who turned surveillance into a shield. Judge Marcus, bringing his knowledge of the law back into the fight. And even Debbie, the local reporter ready to shine a light on corruption. Together, they proved that community matters, that looking out for one another is the greatest strength we have. It's easy to feel like you're alone when facing bullies in power, but the moment neighbors talk, share their stories, and stand united, that's when change happens. This story also teaches the importance of knowing your rights. Eleanor's deep understanding of HOA bylaws and state law gave her the upper hand, proof that knowledge is power. Many seniors sign HOA agreements without fully realizing the extent of the board's power or their own rights. Staying informed, reading the fine print, and knowing when to ask questions is critical, especially when property and home, our most personal assets, are at stake. Finally, Eleanor's journey is a testament to resilience. Even with her health challenges, she chose to fight not just for herself, but for every family being pushed out of Pine Haven. She refused to be another silent victim. Her bravery inspired others and ultimately protected an entire neighborhood. It reminds us all, especially the middle-aged and elderly, that no matter our age or physical strength, we still have a voice, and we can still make a difference. Communities thrive when people stand up, speak out, and hold wrongdoers accountable. In the end, it wasn't just about saving a cottage. It was about reclaiming the spirit of Pine Haven and proving that decency, justice, and community will always be stronger than greed. So the next time you hear someone say, "There's nothing we can do," remember Eleanor Walker, and remember that there's always something you can do when you choose to stand together. If you enjoyed this story and believe in standing up against corruption and fighting for what's right, don't forget to hit that like button to support the channel. Make sure you subscribe so you never miss more incredible stories like this. Real tales of justice, courage, and unexpected heroes. I'd love to hear what you think. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever dealt with an HOA or seen something like this happen in your community? And don't forget to share this video with your friends and family. You never know, someone out there might need this reminder that you're never too small to stand up to power. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.